is Jessica Ahule. I am part of the House of Afro's Capes and Curls. I help out with the AfroCon event. I serve in whatever role Jake would like me to, as needed. So whatever she needs, she can just call me. Professionally, I am an employee at UNC. I work for an organization called City Match, and we are a national maternal child organization that works for local communities across the nation to reduce maternal child health disparities. So that's what I do day to day. But I'm super excited to be here today with our panelists. I'm just going to read just a little bit about them. They will be able to tell you a little bit more in just a second with our first question. But closest to me, I have Dr. Karina Clark. She earned her bachelor's from Washington University in St. Louis in Spanish language and literature and African and African American studies. She also has a master's in Spanish language and literature from Loyola University in Chicago and a PhD in modern languages and literatures from the University of Nebraska. Dr. Clark's dissertation titled Gaspar Octavio Hernandez and Poeta Modernista, I was trying French and not Spanish, so I'm sorry, is the inspiration for her postgraduate research, which focuses on highlighting and critically analyzing the contributions of both colonial and West Indian Afro-Panamanian authors in the United States and Panama. She is currently faculty at Metro and adjunct faculty at Creighton. We also have Dr. Adam Williams. He's a college success navigator and adjunct instructor at Metro as well. He received his bachelor's at CSU Sacramento and doctorate at the University of Texas, Austin. His area of study focuses on representation and the African diaspora. Then next to him, we have So we have Dr. Oge Williams, and I'm going to say it because Nigeria represented. So is an assistant professor at the African History and History for Medicine in the Department of History and the Department of Medical Humanities at Creighton. Her current research focuses on childbirth as a central site of medical, cultural, and imperial constatations in Nigeria's colonial and post-colonial era. Through a historical analysis of reproductive medicine, she highlights the importance of a plural medical structure that approaches healthcare through a cultural, religious, and biomedical lens. Her teachings and research interests include history of medicine in Africa and the African diaspora, early and modern Africa, Africa and globalization, women's history, indigenous health systems, medicine and social justice, and wartime medicine. She is the co-author of writing The Nigerian Biafra War. Panelists are very, very well trained, as you say. But before we get started, this is just a practice that I like to do whenever I speak to audiences. I like to figure out whose land I'm on, because regardless of whomever says whatever, there were people here before all of us came from wherever we came from, whether it was by choice or not. And the people that I like to recognize here are the original online native people that were on this land. So we like to honor them. So it's like to know who is in the place where I am. So this panel, as Judy and Jay discussed a bit, this is just about unity and us coming together as people from across this globe, Black people from across this globe, and what that means. So I will pose the first question to our panelists, and feel free to, your mic should be on, so you don't have to do anything. Tell us about where you are from and who you find as your community. So where you're from and who you find as your community.
Well, I describe myself.
No, you're not on. It's okay.
Oh. I describe myself as a Panamanian Nebraskan. My first memories are from Panama because that's where we were living. When I was about 3 years old, my dad was in the Air Force. And I have a pretty complicated, backstory, but I'll just say They are both African descent, and they met in Panama. My dad came to the United States. He wanted to marry my mom. He went back to Panama, got her, brought her back. And my dad proceeded to have a career in the United States Air Force, which landed me being born in Texas, and my brother and sister being born in Hawaii, and then we went back to Panama for a little while. So my first memories are of people speaking, Black people that look like me, speaking Spanish, and then also speaking English with a very West Indian accent. So my community is basically all the Caribbean, and definitely Panama, and then also my African American community here in the United States, which I did not know a whole lot about. So I decided to major in African American studies so I could find out about my community.
Can everybody hear me? Yeah, okay. Hey everybody, how you doing? Good. All right. So my name is Adam Williams. To answer the question, I would say that I identify with any Black community in the United States as well as the rest of the world. I have had the added benefit of the privilege of traveling throughout a lot of parts of the world. So the Caribbean, different parts of the African continent, South America, South Africa, West Africa. I haven't been to East Africa yet. I know, because this is the first place I've actually been where there is a lot of East Africans, and I'm really excited to, branch out more and not only visit the East African part of the continent, but also to bridge a lot of the networks. So I was born and raised in California. I consider myself an African, Black, depending on who I'm talking to as well. But I do identify as both. But for me, because I have a lot of friends as well as networks, things like that in many parts of the country, many parts of the world, I do recognize myself as part of that global African community. So I feel it's very important for us to recognize ourselves as such because of what we're up against. So when we look at ourselves, as Black people, as somebody and something that is to be respected, we're not only just confronted with our local communities, but we also have the world Black community behind us. So recognizing and understanding that, particularly when I traveled, it was very important.
Hi everyone, I am from Nigeria, and I've been in Omaha, Nebraska for 2.5 years now. Prior to that time, I lived in Austin, Texas. My community is the Black community, wherever I find myself, for obvious reasons. While I get excited to see someone who speaks the same language as me, there's not a lot of that around here. So I identify with anybody who looks like me, who appreciates the same culture as me. So for me, my community is the Black community, just for that reason. And so I tend to go between spaces. It doesn't matter what Black culture that is. I identify with events, I go to places, and that's also how I met my husband to begin with, because he always got into typical African spaces, African organizations, and I did the same thing too. So that's my community, and that's what I identify with.
Yes. Thank you. A question to follow that up. How does your ethnicity influence your Black experience?
I can jump in. How does your ethnicity influence your Black experience? Okay, so ethnicity. I already said I'm Nigerian. I am Igbo. That's an ethnic group in the eastern part of Nigeria. And I would say when it comes to the United States, being African in the United States, it's not necessarily about being Igbo or Yoruba or whatever other ethnic group. Because when I found myself here, I suddenly became the African. It didn't matter where I was from in Africa or what ethnic group, it was African. So I would say that that influenced my experience in two ways. Because on the one hand, I mean, I identify with Black people, right? But because I come from a certain country and a certain ethnicity, I have a different experience of what it means to be Black. There are experiences of what it means to be Black in America that I don't have. But from living in the United States for over a period of time, I begin to identify with that as well. So for example, one of the few encounters that I had, I had somebody walk up to me and say, "Oh wow, your hair is lovely. Can I touch it?" See, that right there, that's a different reaction. As a West African, as a Nigerian, I didn't have that understanding of her reaction. Oh no. I was like, to me, it was normal. It was just a request because I don't have the same connotations associated with what it means to touch a Black woman's hair in America. First of all, I barely had any white people around the part of Africa that I came from. So that relationship did not exist. And I was like, yeah, fine. Yeah, that's fine. Yes, of course. And she touched my hair. I saw nothing with that. Nothing wrong with that. Fast forward 3 years later. In a bus, somebody asked me, "Can I touch your hair?" I didn't need to respond. I just gave her that look like, "You crazy?" So that's a good picture of how, my ethnicity shapes my experience of Blackness in this place, in this country. And over time, we also realize that there's more that actually does unite us, because despite that experience, that ethnicity that I lay claim to, that suddenly vanished in the United States, we share that commonness, that common thing, Blackness. And so that struggle, irrespective of where I came from or where anybody else comes from, suddenly becomes one and the same. All right, I'll let someone else jump in.
I think ethnicity for me has always been very, very complicated because I speak English and people think, "Oh, you must be from here," mainly the Midwest. My sister kind of makes fun of my little Midwestern accent. But then there's times where I ask her, like, "Hey, how was your trip to Indiana?" And they're like, "No, it's Indiana." We need to yank it out. So having that experience of just like not being able to communicate, why maybe not touching your hair, like not being uncomfortable with that initially, and then like being educated by the Black community as to why it might have been appropriate and all the subtext attached to that. Well, I grew up with that, but I also grew up with like a completely different idea of what it was to be Black. So for me, my ethnicity was always something that I never had to show people. It was always pointed out by other people to me. "Oh, you speak with a little bit of a weird accent," or because my parents' first language was Spanish, and they learned English, "You speak so proper." And I'm like, this is how they speak to me, this is how I speak to them. So being able to really be comfortable with my ethnicity, which was so diverse, and the fact that I identified with so many things that were unfamiliar to my current environment, like being Black in Nebraska, and you tell people you're Panamanian, they ask you if you speak Mexican. And you're like, no. There's a whole country, continent of Black and brown people who still practice a lot of Native African practices that are living in the Americas that our American, Northern American Black people don't know about. So, you know, we eat plantain, we eat black-eyed peas, we eat pigeon peas, we eat coconut rice in Panama. Because Panama was a majority Black country from jump. But people don't know that. So just because I was a little bit different, people could tell I was different, and that's how I became aware of ethnicity, if that makes any sense. Because for me, it was just normal, like the way I lived. So.
The question was race, Black and ethnicity.
How does your ethnicity influence your Black experience?
I think ethnicity in general sometimes is very confusing term, particularly for Black folks in the United States, where, you know, generally it's associated with some geographical mass, and it's also us not identifying a lot of times with the term American and what that culture pretty much associates with it, because we've been stripped of a lot of rights and dignities and a lot of other things in this country. So, you know, for me being African and being Black, associating it again on a global, more so context, you know, it takes me to a more shared understanding that we as Black people have a shared struggle throughout the rest of the world. So the experiences of what's going on in South Africa directly relate to what's going on in West Africa, directly relate to what's going on in Black people out here with when we get police shot by the police and killed, or many other things. So it's hard for me to kind of separate a lot of those. When I look at that ethnic, I do associate it with our experiences here as Black people at home, looking at our, not just in enslavement, but also looking at our fight and will to get freedom, to a struggle that we're still fighting every day. Something that when we look at an education system, when we look at our really will to continue to be Black, it's something that I think that we are very much connected on a lot of those struggles. So yeah, just bringing a lot of good stuff together, it's really something that I really feel that ethnic and race is a lot of times there's just a misunderstanding a lot of times. That's why things like nationality is put in, and it's a lot of other things where we use separate concepts, but for us, especially on this hemisphere, it's very much the same thing.
Thank you so much for that. And thinking about that, you all kind of said a common thing, thinking about your Blackness. Tell us about, if you can recall, the first time someone opened your world to view to what Blackness could be. So think about the first time someone opened your world to view to what Blackness could be.
I think I am a little bit spoiled because I didn't watch you. I had the privilege of having like 3 Black professors. So this is like in the 90s, you know, early 90s. They were the first Black educators I'd ever met, let alone been taught by. So it was great. You know, I mean, I had a mom at that time that already got a master's degree, and you know, she was in education. But you know, you kind of exclude your family from like those heroic, you know, things because you're there. You don't realize how great it is. You know them, but to have an advisor who was African American, that was just assigned to me, to have a psychology professor, and to also have an African history professor with that. While she was pretty amazing because they had Africans teaching African history. So the three of them actually showed me what greatness can be. They actually inspired my journey to go further in education and to get my PhD because they did it. And they did it under circumstances that were much more difficult than what I actually faced getting my PhD, even though, you know, I'm sure you guys can attest, it wasn't easy either. But they did it under much more difficult circumstances, and I just was able to see just three amazing examples at a very, very young age, 18, 19, of Black excellence teaching me, not wishing things for me, showing me how far I could go.
I have the advantage of working with a lot of young folks, so I see it every day. And a lot of times, getting back to where we're just stripped of everything, and then we're still able to make what we're able to make and do what we're able to do. The greatness that we see in our poetry, as they came up and alluded to earlier, just a lot of the things that, you know, to be honest, would have took most people and most races out. You know, we're still here fighting. You know, we can look at culturally, you know, the things that happened in the past and all the great artwork and all the, you know, pyramids and so many other things that we created as a race and as different people. But it's also important to look in present times and the things that we do, the great things that we are creating today, and look at the power, look at the strength of what goes on. You know, a lot of these people try to do any and everything to stop us, you know, and a lot of times we beat ourselves down and we say, well, nothing's going on. Sometimes you hear narratives on the continent of, you know, embezzlement, or we're, you know, copyrighting all our things, or stealing a bunch of stuff, you know, but it's like we're not looking at what we are doing and what we're creating. Like in Nigeria, they have the third largest film industry in the world. You know, you never hear anybody talk about that. In Nigerian film industry and what's happening. Why aren't we looking at connecting with brothers and sisters on the continent and artists out here versus artists on the continent? How come we're not, you know, looking at merging a lot of our talents? How come when we come here to Omaha or other places, the first thing that we're not doing is acknowledging our brothers and sisters, saying, I see you, you know, particularly when we're in spaces that are, you know, predominantly white, you know, it's very important, especially when a lot of times they're not getting it and they're not feeling it, meaning that they're coming here from a different country and they're looking for that association. It's really important for us to get it to them. So there's many different things, and you know, that association I feel is key.
So as a Nigerian, I didn't really grow up knowing being conscious or aware of the Black community, like this large Black community. The identity, and I'm sure a lot of Africans in the room might have the same experience. The identity that I associated myself with a lot was that ethnic identity and that national identity. But then, so the first time I began to think about this Blackness as a general idea, as a powerful unifying idea, Blackness across national boundaries, was in college. Actually, one of the professors in the history department made it a point to offer Black history classes. So we had all these Nigerian histories, African histories, US histories, a lot of that, Russian history, British history, you name it. But she had this course, Blacks in the Diaspora, and that had a significant impact on me, because it was from that point that I began to realize and connect with the experiences of Black people in the United States and just in the Americas in general. And then she had this other course, African Cultural Survival in the New World. So before I actually showed up here, and my husband was surprised too, I already knew about Kwanzaa. I knew the principles of Kwanzaa, and he's like, I didn't think you'd know that. But that's thanks to that class. So that's the first time really that I began to conceptualize that idea of Blackness and what it could be, because I had ideas in my head of what Black people can do, especially considering that we have this population in the United States. And we have this shared struggle. In the United States it's different, in the African continent it's different, but it's neocolonialism, and here it's oppression, racial oppression, white supremacy. There's a commonality in that. And then in the economic aspect, Adam had a lot to do with that actually. In graduate school, him and his group of friends constantly kept talking about economic unity, how Black people in the United States can actually pool their resources and be able to tap into the resources that are available on the African continent, tap into the networks that exist, because we are here, African immigrants in the United States. There's a significant population of us. So if African Americans and recent African immigrants can come together, right, and pool their economic resources together, imagine what we would achieve. So that's one of the things that him and his group of friends were actually constantly talking about in graduate school, and they are still talking about it, and they've gone beyond talking about it actually. So that gave me a different picture of what that alternative Blackness identity, was that the term you used? Yeah. Could be.
Thank you. It's great to hear just like all of your viewpoints, and I'm so happy to have all of you from different Afro experiences across the world be a part of this. And you all are already starting to get to like that commonalities piece that's later on. But one of the things that I wanted to just bring out and ask you all is, what about Black culture, and we're thinking across the diaspora, do you find joy in?
I can take it. Sorry. So, I would say, number one, like I have about Black, just number one, the love. Doesn't matter where you go, with Black people, I feel that love. Whether it's going into, if I go to South Carolina, and meet some of my folks on my dad's side, or go back home to California, in the Bay Area where I'm from, I feel the love there. Here, we've been here about 3 years now, and just being ingratiated into the Black community here in Omaha, the overall community as well, but particularly the Black community. It doesn't matter where I go, on the African continent, I felt that love. It's something that I feel that, it makes us a part of a holistic community. So, I think that it starts with that. It starts with getting to know one another. It starts with, definitely where we're in the same rooms together, where we're doing things like having cookouts or just inviting people over to the house, talking. That's how I got to a lot of places. I didn't do the traditional route where I did study abroad and things like that. And I would, many of you guys who are college students, I would really advocate you getting to know other people from different parts of the country as well as the world, because those were some of my closest allies when I went to a lot of these countries. I stayed with their families, they spoke the language for me, saved me a lot of money with, different things like, place to stay, food, all of those type of things. Plus, you don't get the tourist kind of experience. So it's something I feel that you don't, especially with all the propaganda that comes out in the United States. You hear so much about, how great the United States is and America and yada, 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 but you don't hear about any of these other things that are going on in the rest of the world. Truth be told, contrary to popular belief, it is a big world. There is so many different cultures, languages, politics, different ideas. I really feel you don't really learn until you get out of the space and the habitat that you provide. When you are experiencing new information and you get something new into your brain, that's when learning begins. It's not just hanging around with people who have the same beliefs and ideas. You don't really grow that way. It's about getting out, and that's when I really started feeling I was educated, is really when I started to travel. If you can't travel, it's a lot of money, so if you can't travel out of the country, then start off with going down to Chicago, go to New York, go to drive to Kansas City, learn everything you can to know about, who you are, and then also so many of the people that have sacrificed for you to be where you're at. So, a big part, I again just feel that it starts a lot of it at home.
Well, I will say, in a term, what brings me joy is we have not lost everything. And what I mean is, in the Black experience, especially here in the United States, we tend to focus on what was lost. We lost our birthright, we lost our kinship lines, we lost our sense of identity of our ethnic groups that were different ones. I know I'm Nigerian, I don't know if I'm Igbo or Yoruba or any of the other ethnic groups. I know I come from that area. We tend to focus on what we have lost, but there's so much that we haven't lost. And so when it comes to the joy that I get being Black, I realize when I talk to Judy, she comes from Kenya, I come from Panama, but there's certain times when we talk, she finishes my sentences and I can finish hers. Because there is this idea of, oh, I get you. We haven't lost our dialogue with one another, but we don't know that until we begin to speak to each other. And I think that speaks a lot to what you said. We have to always initiate that dialogue, because then we'll know what we haven't lost. And so that's what brings me joy. I can go anywhere in Africa and be accepted as a sister. And nobody's gonna ask me where I'm from, because they know my experience with America means Africa's homeland. I know I'll be welcome there. I don't have to worry about that. But I also know that so much of the experience with being in bondage and transatlantic slave trade, we kept a lot of that stuff. They did not socialize that out of us. The things that we do on a daily basis that came from our mothers, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers, those looks, the patience, the control, okay? The mastery of certain things. Spoken word. That is African. That's not African, that is African. We haven't lost everything. Whether we know it or not, it is actually in our blood and in our souls, and we pass that along consciously now in the 21st century context, right? But we've been passing it along subconsciously. I'll just share one story. When I was doing my research for my very, very Black poet from Panama, because both sides of them came from Black people, so you look at this guy, he's Black. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about him, because nobody was talking about him except people from Panama. And the Panamanian people, he was just Panamanian. But to people outside, he was Black. So I decided to focus my studies on his life work, but I came across a community in Argentina. If anybody knows anything about Argentina, it's a very, very white country. It was actually socially engineered to be white. They did not actually get rid of Black people, but they had Black people. And when you think about an African Renaissance, an African American Renaissance, I'll put that since we're all on the American continent, South, Central, North, there was an African American Renaissance in Argentina. Okay? But the leadership, politics decided, that's just too much for us. So they started asking Italians and Polish and Germans and Greeks to come to Argentina and to marry the Black people so they would line it up. 2001, you know what they established? Afro-Argentinian Heritage Day. Because people who are lighter than all of us know that they come from Africans. And they wanted to celebrate it, so the country established that day. It's not all lost. Even if it looks like it's all lost, it is not. And so that's what brings me joy.
And for me, it will primarily be two things, family and food. Yes. Someone had to say food.
That's right.
Yes.
So family, I appreciate the value that the Black community, it doesn't matter what part of the world they are in, places in family and in kinship. So when I see that, even here, among the African community, that's something that warms my heart. That's something that I take joy and pride in. And I take great motivation too from my African American brothers and sisters who, sometimes you see Black people, two Black people walking along the street and they don't know each other from anywhere, and they acknowledge each other. They say, hey, how are you doing? Like they've always known each other. And then the families, the Black families that I've been in contact with too, the value that that word means, what that word actually entails to them, family, kinship, the support system, the relationships. That's something that I really love and I appreciate. And like she said, we may think we've lost it all, we haven't. Everything's a work in progress, but that is still very much alive. It's as though it is the heart of Blackness, really. And then food. Yes, I can't do without talking about that every Black restaurant that I can find and eat the food, try the food. Well, I generally would not go to, I wouldn't say that. I typically do not go to Nigerian restaurants because, for obvious reasons, I can't cook the food, right? But then I do go, but I save that for last. But the food is just great. The flavor, I don't think any other food has more flavor than the food from a Black kitchen. Yeah. That's just the truth. I love the food and the flavor.
All right, thank you so much for that. Just to recap, the pieces of joy that you all stated: love, family, food, connecting to people. We haven't lost everything, and that sense of I get you. I think this is a somewhere in Central or Southern African word, sawubona, and it just means I see you. And when you said that, that's exactly the word that came to mind. There's just a sense of connectedness, and that is a common joy. I'm gonna ask you kind of like a dual question, and then we will open up for questions from the audience. What are some of the barriers to connecting us? And what are some of the opportunities that can bring us together as a whole? So I'm moving just across the diaspora. What are some of the barriers to connecting us, and what are some of the opportunities that bring us together?
I would say the biggest barrier is probably distance. Particularly because of the cost. I've traveled to, like I said, many parts of the African continent, and it's far. It's far from, the United States. It's a what about a 12, 13-hour plane ride.
It's a direct flight.
It's a direct flight. To Nigeria, to Ghana. It was about 17, 18 hours to get to South Africa. So it definitely distance. Because of that distance, there's a huge barrier in being able to, what goes on that side of the world isn't necessarily the same things that we experience as Black people on this side of the world. So a lot of times I think that, because of that, when we see them, when we see people who look like us, we just automatically expect for them to get everything that, we've done, we've been through, and things like that. But there is a shared struggle. There is a definite shared struggle, but it's different. Colonialism was a little different from the transatlantic slave trade and what we actually did, but it had the same results, right? It went in order to serve the same purpose. It's important on the other side of that for us to, and getting into, Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism was a philosophical strategy, an approach. A lot of times we just say that it's unified. It's like, no, we banded together and had an understanding that in order to topple white supremacy, we needed to do this together. And I think a lot of times we lose that fact. This is something that needs to be fought on many different forefronts, whether it be culturally, whether it be economically, whether it be socially, through language, through so many different arenas. But I think that the fact that a lot of times we just look at it as a monolith and just do one wins, that kind of restrains us a little bit. But, getting back to that question, some of the barriers is not really being able to look at all the powerful things because of the diversity and the so many experiences that we can really topple a lot of things a lot easier than we think if we band together. And that's the power of a lot of these things. When we look at like African independence movements, that was a movement that on the African continent, every single African country, except for South Africa, overthrew their colonial oppressors within a 10-year period, a decade. So a lot of this stuff is to really understand. Now, that's not to say that they didn't have a lot of other issues of independence and economic oppression that still goes on to this day. But it's to show you that a lot of white supremacy is an idea. Some call it a disease. It's something that's built on a house of cards. And if we really understand what we're about and the power that we have, a lot of these things come down very easily. And that's really, again, going to that previous question, is the power within us and the beauty within us. And the importance for us to understand what we're doing when we say Umoja, when we say, I'm your brother, or when we say, Pan-Africanism. We're uniting and we're sharing that common bond. So again, it's so important for us when we say these words to understand what's behind it. This stuff is not a game. I think a lot of times we throw on cultural things and racial things like it's a game. These things were meant for us to be able to gain power. Something that we don't have. Doesn't matter where I go on the African continent, the outlook looks the same. You know, the position that we're in, we're on the bottom a lot of times. Economically, I'm not talking about culturally and things like that, but I'm talking about economically and sharing the power. We're on the bottom of a lot of these things. We go to a lot of countries, you know, people come to this country, in fact, and, you know, they don't approach it as a game. But a lot of times we are caught up in playing dress up and, you know, trying to impress people who, you know, we don't need to be impressing. You know, so it's really important for us to look at why we're doing certain things and what we're trying to gain, and take it very seriously, because it has real results. Sometimes we forget, you know, the results of what we're doing when we're engaging in a lot of the things that we're doing.
So back in 2013, I was reading this Facebook post. It was an African-American woman who posted something on Facebook and was mad at this African, calling this African person a sellout. And I started scrolling through the comments, and that was a point I realized that there was a big misunderstanding between Africans and African Americans in the United States, because it seemed to me that we didn't understand where we were both coming from. You know, like I mentioned earlier, like we have different experiences of blackness and different experiences of whiteness too, or lack thereof. So one of the things that I think we should start with is understanding that the way I react to a situation as an African is not the way an African American would react to that situation, and vice versa. So this person, the reason for the whole Facebook post was the African American thought this white person said something racist, something that this African person should be mad about. But there was no reaction from the African. And when I read that, I don't remember exactly what the comment was, but when I read it, I could identify with this African person. Because considering the history and their experience of blackness, they did not have that context to get angry at that comment. So I had a conversation with an African-American colleague about that post, and we were going back and forth. I was trying to explain why this African does not have the same reaction as the African-American and every other African-American person who commented on that post. You know, the fact that we had different experiences. Of course, eventually, when you live in the country long enough, you get subjected to the same racism and racist comments, and then you begin to understand. But that's not necessarily the case. And I've also heard an African sister say, well, African Americans, there's no reason why they shouldn't be doing better. They have all this stuff available to them. Well, they don't, really. It's a nuanced history. So I feel like the first step to working together is understanding our various histories, our different perspectives to things, and appreciating that. And also making a conscious effort to accommodate each other. Because I will tell you, in graduate school, second year, one of my colleagues went to the Black graduate student event. She went twice. She didn't go back again. She is African. And she said, well, everybody just ignored me, like treating me like I am lesser, I'm not, I'm something less, I'm lesser than all of them. I'm not going back. So we also have to, make a deliberate effort to accommodate each other, to understand that we have different attitudes and different perspectives, different ways of socializing. I might walk into this space as an African, and I'm reserved and conservative because I want to understand, first of all, where I'm at. at the end of the day, we are still foreigners. An African immigrant is still an immigrant. And then sometimes there's the whole immigration part too, where Black people in general would expect everyone to jump into a particular fray or a particular cause. Well, for some Africans, they are on whatever visa it is they are on, and they have whatever issue they are trying to negotiate, even permanent residency that could be rejected because, hey, you made so and so post or so and so comment. We also have to understand all of that. I think the first step is understanding each other. And he did mention he did talk about the distance, right? It's expensive and it's long. It's a long trip. It's a long way between Africa and the United States, the African continent in general and the United States. But we are here. We can start that collaboration with the Africa that is right here with us. We can begin little collaborations, little projects. Like, what is it that Black businesses need here in the US? I feel, this is my personal opinion, every other person is taking advantage of what Africa has to offer, but the Black person. So if we can partner with these connections that we have here and see what we can do together. Hey, okay, you need shea butter or you need hibiscus. Well, it is produced in Mali, Ghana, Nigeria, and I know this Ghanaian person right here, or this Nigerian person right here. Let's collaborate.
Yes.
And actually establish something. That's how we can begin to build power. That's how we can begin to bridge that difference. And I'll stop here.
So, advantages, right?
Barriers and opportunities to.
So this is something I think I've struggled with recently, and I'm going to just say that everybody, with every melanated person here, melanated, is that easy? Person here is probably struggled with it. Kind of for me, and maybe for other people, boils down to identity and responsibility. I love Jade's organization. I love it. Nerds. That's me. And as a sister that works in computers and a brother that works in cybersecurity, I teach online classes and I design them. I am a nerd. You know, I grew up coding, you know, our video games on a Commodore 64. I think I should be allowed to be who I am. And not be criticized for what I am or I'm not doing for my community. I feel like there's this struggle between self-determination and the needs and the requirements of the community. So I struggle with that. And it's niche organizations like that that speak to me, because I don't want anybody criticizing my experience for not being Black enough. I'm Black. It's an experience. It's a Black experience. The other thing is finding that line of, am I a spokesperson for you or you or you? There are times when I, turn up the Blackness and educate. And sometimes I'm like, no, I literally just want some frozen yogurt and I want to enjoy my time. I cannot take up the struggle every minute of the day, but because I'm Black, mostly because I'm a Black woman, they just think they can handle it. No, we need massages. We need manicures. We need time just to play a video game. And so for me, it's always boiled down to what is my responsibility to my community and where is my own self-determination that must it come into conflict with that. Recently, I was teaching. I had an individual come and ask me, when I teach Spanish for a program, it's an African American it's a program that serves African American families, and she's like, I want you to do it, they need someone of color doing it. And I'm like, yes, I get it, but Judy knows, I am a busy woman. I don't get to sleep, I do work, and it just hit me in that second. I'm like, wait a minute, I could say no. So I didn't really say no. What I did was, I said, not me, but I have a very bright African American student who could teach this, because I am teaching her, and she is my color, and she is what you want, and maybe this might inspire her to do more, because I'm tired. Like, I am, who is tired? Okay, and the thing about it, I think it's like the biggest burden to this huge question. When I wrote my dissertation, I had 3 white professors telling me I wasn't black enough. And I'm like, this is modernist poetry. Nobody cared about being black. Do I need to show in his poetry that he was black when he's just black? That's okay. He should just be black. Do I need to play up something that did not exist in him, in his identity, in his worldview, because he was too worried about being an amazing poet? Can I just be a poet? Must I be a black poet? I can't answer these questions, because some days I am a poet, and some days I'm black. I'm a very, very black poet. And so the idea of when I can just be me, when I can represent my community and take up the fight, or take up the collaborations, when all the work we're doing actually starts killing us, because we don't have time to work out, or eat well, or practice yoga, or just take a mental health break, or go to a mental health professional to take care of ourselves. Okay? You see where I'm going here. So I guess taking time to have dialogue with each other, yes, making the journey, but also giving each other the benefit of the doubt. I don't think we do that enough in the Black community. I think along many lines, sometimes we just want to be ourselves. Sometimes we have to start an organization just so that people get it. I'm not gonna be that person, I don't have time, but I admire you. But it's an internal struggle, right? Sometimes you just want to be daddy, right? No doctor, no nothing, just like, hey, I want to play with my child, and so sometimes it's the roles that we have in front of us, how we prioritize responsibilities, our identities, ever-shifting identities, and the idea of self-determination within that whole realm. I think we can't answer those questions, but I think being patient and kind with each other and understanding is the first step.
Can I add just real quick? Even just, internally with yourself, as well as your family and the community that you come from, it starts there. And, I think, in the United States especially, there is a big, I would say, divide between economics, with Black folks coming from, and coming from lower class or coming from middle class to quote unquote upper class, and then that ability to still be able to see yourself and define yourself with the Black community. So many people who are in, because of ways that Blackness is quote unquote defined or ascribed to us because of stereotypes, that some people don't feel like that they want to represent or be a part of the Black community. As well as just, again, as mentioned, coming in and feeling like you are a part of it. We need to make sure that, everybody is included. When we say Black, we mean Black. This is not a quote unquote something that we are distinguishing based on culture and things like that. We are definitively talking about race. So, within those spaces, it's very important also to have that myriad of different opinions and coming from different. It's important to take stands and know where you fit within it, but it's very important that this is something that we feel is very inclusive. And I feel that a lot of people don't feel like that they are part of the Black community. I come from a middle class background. A lot of my friends and whatnot don't define or see themselves from the Black community. Or when they speak, because they don't do certain things, they don't feel like that they are part of the Black community without going into certain other ways of acting. Same thing with if you go to the college environment, it's very, coming into from where you, if you come from a background that's quote unquote disadvantaged or something, you feel like you have to go and do certain other things in order to be inclusive, instead of just being, I'm Black, I'm part of the Black community. And it's very, it's very important that, people feel that way.
I'd like to add one more thing too. So they've all hit on or highlighted the importance of dialogue. I think that one simple thing we can do is we have various events, right? I haven't been long enough, in Omaha long enough to make this judgment. But in Austin, Texas, it seems like Black events were divided between African events, African American, or Black events. So I think that we can make deliberate efforts to actually include people from this other side of the divide in those events. That's the only way we can actually start dialoguing, because you would realize by going to some events that we actually do not get the chance to come together, to be in the same space at the same time. So I know we have leaders of various organizations in the room. So one thing that may be practical or may be effective would be for this particular organization to reach out to, Africans in the community, involve them in the event, and vice versa from the African side. The events that are occurring, reach out to our African American brothers and sisters too, and involve them in those events. That's one way we can begin to broach the subject of understanding, begin to have dialogues, begin to see each other more closely and as more connected, more than this idea of Blackness. We are Black. Well, how are we Black? Let's actually work together as though we are all Black. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for all of your feedback on those questions. And when you think about bringing people from Africa, from African American people, Afro-Latino people, from across the globe together, that's really what the vision was behind this event. It's really just bringing us all together to begin to have these very important conversations, to find commonalities in our experiences, to notice those differences in our experience, and to bring us all together so that we can begin to talk about things and form a foundation of shared power to really move things forward. So, with that, we will take any questions from the audience if there are questions from you all.
Hello, everybody. My name is Toby. Hello. Okay, my name is Toby Adelade, and first I must say a big thank you to Judy for having me come around here today. And I want to say it's a pleasure to meet my Nigerian sisters sitting down here. I'm from Nigeria, and I'm from the southwest of Nigeria. I'm Yoruba, and she's Igbo, and it's beautiful to be here in Omaha, Nebraska. I don't know where to start this from, but I just want to say that all of us, we have a collective future as Africans. And the earlier we come into that understanding, we all have a common quote-unquote enemy. And if we don't work together, we're as well as ending our future as Africans. On the 4th of February, An article was written by a man called Colin Coleman. He's a professor at Yale. And I'll try and pull that up on my phone. And it said something that is very interesting about tomorrow, which is the future. He wrote an article titled "The Africa is the Last Frontier of Global Growth." Africa is the last frontier of global growth. And whether you believe it or not, something is about to happen to the world, and Africa is responsible for that thing that is about to happen. And it said by the year 2025, the generation of revenue in Africa is going to be about $5.6 trillion US. While all of us are struggling to do 9 to 5, guess what? The white folks are going back to Africa to do investment again. In 2019, research shows that $1.34 billion was invested in Africa. 50% of that money was invested in Nigeria. Guess who invested the money? China, Asian continent, Africa, white folks, because they're seeing the potential. Why you don't want to associate with African brothers? Some guys are going out there and they're cleaning out the money. And we just have to wake up and say, how, which is my question to the panelists, what are the structure that we must put in place? What are the processes that all of us here today must begin to take in order to protect, preserve the prosperity of Africa for future posterity? What must we do to protect, to preserve the prosperity of Africa for posterity? And that's what we need to talk about today, because something is about to happen and we need to be part of it. You and I need to go back to Africa and go preserve our heritage. It's very important. If not, the second colonization will happen, and it's not going to be a colonization of people, but of the prosperity of Africa. Thank you very much.
So, I love that question. And that's some things that I'm trying to figure out, when you talk about preserving and securing, when you talk about preserving and securing, particularly, our heritage, our homeland, all of these things, so that we can build a future and be a part of this, have a power position in the world, something that's to be respected. The first thing I think about is self-sufficiency. We have to kind of get back to, especially Black people in the United States, to a lot of things that was passed down to us, a lot of things that I think went away when we got to immigration, which was being able to communicate with your neighbor, ways of disciplining our kids, and not necessarily feeling like we need to discipline our kids like the mainstream does. It's really important that we save our money, that we not get so bent out of shape with credit, that we, understand that, it's really interesting growing up. My parents never really taught, even though they practiced it, it didn't necessarily trickle down towards understanding economics and understanding how to save, how to, learn about taxes and how to pay my taxes, how to, what a mortgage is, and how to, these are all things that I'm just now, learning over the last few years as I'm getting into, instead of, understanding and growing up playing the stock market. We need to understand these things before we jump into the game, before we, get out and, brush out our chest and say we're here. We need to, first have a power position, a power stake, and actually have some capital, so that when we actually do get out there and jump out, we're standing on something. And I think for so long we jumped out there and we stood on nothing. Whether it be protests, whether it be our movements, a lot of times we were creating as we went, instead of, over time, just kind of building. I think quietly would be better. But, so that we don't show our hands so much. But at the same time, you know, we are under the assumption and the knowledge that we are going towards and building an infrastructure. We're raising our kids in the way that we want to, in a sense that we are not just throwing them in the public education system. That we are, whether it be homeschools or whether it be schools that we deem have something close towards what we're trying to teach our kids. That can be in a private school, it can be in an Afrocentric school, it can be in a combination of many different things. But we have to be very deliberate and very strategic in raising our kids and also ourselves. A lot of times we say raising our kids and we don't think about the adults and where we stand. We just think we're just throwing away this generation as we stand. We have to build and see what we can do now. But I think that it's not an easy thing. A lot of times that we jump into a lot of these things, we think that it's a very simplistic and overnight we're going to get the type of advancements and rights that we're looking for. These things are not going to give away these things easily. So I think we need to go into a lot of this with a long-term strategic plan that we take very seriously and deliberately. But it starts today. It starts just for little things that you can do. And I think we went over a lot of little things, you know, that we can do building up. But I think it's very important not to just jump out there and show your hand so much, and also make sure you have the skills so when you are in those positions, we can make the most effective moves.
Thank you. Any other questions on the audience?
Thank you for everybody who did this. This is amazing. That's one thing I'm loving it. I love it. I love it. As a domestic engineer, a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother, I have a concern. I have 4 daughters. One's working on her PhD. She's been a teacher in the system in our community for years and years. Another got her degree at Creighton. Another got 2 degrees in Lincoln, and another was a domestic engineer with 3 of us kind of in. And I'm very proud to say that, you know, I got a chance to be a domestic engineer for a little while, so I can lay that foundation. Unfortunately, because of some things that I went through, I've tried to go back to school, and this last time, it just hurt me so much of the prevarications and the embarrassing lies that they teach about Mother Africa, which is the cradle of civilization, where all races came from. Was for us, nobody else will be here. And because of that, it's really hard for me to swallow all the prevarications in their lives. And so I taught myself with, you know, John Henry Clark, Dr. Clark Anderson, Dr. Francis Wesley, Dr. Ben, Dr. Naughton, you know, the Dr. Robin Walker, you know, when we ruled and different things like that. But unfortunately, even though those are truths, they carry no weight in any way, take fashion or form. But the schools here are set up to perpetuate lies, and then people are getting degrees. They have to agree to lies in order to get a degree. And Dr. Imani, he wrote a book on the academy of education as well as head games. And I'm just so impressed, and I'm just wondering, how did you guys do it? And with me my age, as old as I am, is it too late? I mean, how can I handle that? To have to agree to these lies, and is there anyone looking to say that until that we're going to have to form an educational system where the lies are not taught, you know, like before the Mayflower, I mean, and you know, you know what I mean? Who's doing that?
Sure. I'm just going to ask the panelists to be brief on what you think.
Yes. in order to get anywhere, you kind of have to play the game until you get to the point. Just quickly, it starts with publishing companies. It's not necessarily education. Not everybody who has a PhD is a genius. Newsflash. Because we all know people who just got through. I worked hard. It took me 11 years to get my PhD. So it's not too late, is number one. Number two, a lot of the dialogue needs to come from the teachers, how we encourage our teachers in school. Lots of times it is giving them the direction, because my mom was a middle school principal and teacher for over 40 years. She would have loved it if parents were more involved in the schools, just hands down. So being involved in school, bringing in those resources, volunteering in your classes, sometimes that's the most immediate give back that we can do, like right away. Taking that time if we have it. But the other thing is, you know, sometimes it's best to know your enemy from the inside. So I think it's worth it to go through. And I know I had to bite my tongue in a lot of things. That's part of the process until we make a difference. So that's how I think.
I can add to that quickly too. At the graduate level, it's very important to surround yourself with people who share the same view as you do. Because if you surround yourself with the wrong people, for instance, your committee, your advisors, your supervisors, oh my goodness, that's a recipe for disaster. You may never make it out of there. So the smart thing would be, the practical thing would be to identify those professors and those individuals who share the same view as you, who have policies and goals that are aligned with yours, and make those people part of your committee members. Make those people your advisors, because when trouble comes knocking on the door, those are the people that will stand up for you and stand by you. So that's one thing that I have to add in.
Yeah, it's very important to be strategic with the, particularly in Greenville. They have a big disassociation and not wanting to recognize a lot of our scholars, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Dr. Amos Wilson, so many Afrocentric scholars, but then if they don't fit within a certain box, then they're not going to necessarily recognize. So all throughout, I was wondering where a lot of these scholars were. That also, not just the scholars, but also the ones that, nobody ever talked about, Ella Baker and Ida B. Wells and so many other people that I was raised on and learned from, Freddie Douglass. And so, they don't teach from that camp, they teach from a much different. So it's very important to be strategic, know where your alliances are. It's also just really important that we understand, as she mentioned, that every person who is a PhD or in graduate school is not a genius. So it's really important to understand that you can be educated in many different realms. Like, I didn't know that when I went into the PhD that you could get a job outside of education. There's so many different realms, it's so flexible. You don't need to go to, that's another thing, for a lot of these jobs, you don't need to get a PhD. You sometimes don't need to get a master's degree. It's helpful, but at the same time, me also understanding and working with Metropolitan Community College, there's so many options and opportunities, especially for young Black men, working with our hands and getting out, using a lot of the energy that a lot of times is suppressed in a lot of these public school systems, that, a lot of these jobs, we can start getting experience, build a family. There's so many different routes that you can take, but sometimes just make it streamlined and make you think that that's the only route.
Real quickly too, one other thing is that we, as a people, we shouldn't depend on the system to educate our kids. That's one thing we should also understand. We can educate ourselves, whatever it is that system gives our kids, we should then make it our responsibility to teach our kids who they are, what they need to know at home. Because I think that that's very important. At this point, there isn't a lot we can do to change the system, that educational system. There's stuff we can do. But if you can teach your kids at home, lay a strong foundation, nothing beats that. That's what I think.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Can give it up for our panelists, please. Thank you for participating in this conversation today. This is the first of many other things that we hope to come to bring our communities together as one. So thank you all for being here. And I will turn it over to our hosts for the day, Judy and Jane.